Stand up.
By reciting the bracha for studying Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Welcome to all those who have come to join. I'm grateful to each one of you. I got to make a couple of statements before I begin. First one is I usually begin with a story. This time I'm going to end with a story. And the story I'm going to tell you at the end, I think, is one of the great stories of modern Jewish literature. So I hope you'll stay to the end of the class. The second thing I want to say before I begin is that the Hebrew of the psalm we're going to study today is tough. Even those of you who know Hebrew will probably have a difficult time, as I do, understanding the Hebrew of this psalm. And there's a very simple reason why. You and I have a tough time reading Shakespeare because it's 400 years old and the language has changed since the time of Shakespeare. And we have an even tougher time trying to read Chaucer because Chaucer is 900 years old and the language has changed since his time. This is a psalm 300 years old. So it's no wonder that we have trouble understanding the Hebrew, but we'll do our best. And the last thing I'm going to say before we begin is we're going to study two documents today. A psalm from the ancient times, a short story from our time. The first, I think, is the most brazen insult of God that can be found in all the Bible. And the second is the most brazen indictment of God that can be found in all of modern Jewish literature. And so I think you're going to be shocked by both. The question I want to raise with you today is how come this psalm, which criticizes God so brutally, somehow got into the book of Psalms? How come it wasn't censored out? And how come this short story, which brutally indicts God, remains in modern Jewish literature and nobody censored it out? Let me begin Psalm 44 with a confession. I never read it before. I never heard of it before. And I'm sure that's true for many of you. If it wasn't for Shai Held, who teaches Bible in New York, I would never have discovered this psalm. And Shai Held tells me that he never heard of this psalm either until a couple of years ago. It's a psalm that never appears in the prayer book. It's a psalm that is never recited in the Jewish year. And I can understand why. I can understand why nobody ever taught it to me. Not in Hebrew school, not in Hebrew high school, not even in the seminary. And nobody taught it to me because it's so chutzpahdik. It's the opposite of Psalm 23 or of Psalm 8 or of Ashrei, which we've studied so far. Psalm 23 is a love song in which the psalmist declares his total love and loyalty to God. The key words are, yea, though I walk through the shadow of the valley of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Psalm 8 says, how beautiful is this world, God. How lucky I am that you've made me a little lower than the angels. Psalm 30 says, thank you, God. I was very sick. Thank you for healing me. And then comes this psalm and says, where are you, God? Why have you abandoned me? Why do you treat me like garbage? Forgive me for using this crude expression, but I think that's the summary of the psalm. The question I want to explore with you today is how did this psalm, which is so rude and angry and blunt and critical of God remain in the Bible? How come nobody censored it out? I would like to suggest that one of the great wonders of the Bible is that this psalm, even though it goes against all the rest of the Bible, was allowed to stay in the Bible. I don't know if I were the editor of the Bible, if I would have had the courage to let the psalm stay. The classic answer of the Bible to the question of why do we suffer is because we sinned. As the prayer book puts it, on account of our sins, we have been exiled from our land. That's the usual answer. This psalm denies that. This psalm says, no way. This psalm says we are innocent. We have done nothing wrong. And therefore, if we are suffering, God, it must be your fault. And we demand to know why. I don't know how to date the psalm. It was probably written after one of Israel's defeats. But there are so many times when Israel was defeated in ancient times, that's not enough of a clue to tell us exactly when it was written. My guess, for whatever it's worth, is that it was written after one of Israel's military defeats. It was written at a time when Israel was not only lost a war, but when its people were sold into slavery. And now I'm going to ask Rabbi Spitz to put the psalm on the screen, and we're going to study it a line at a time. Rabbi Spitz, start with the top. Okay, he titled it, Why Do You Hide Your Face? He's more of a gentleman than I am. For the leader, for the Korachites, a maskil, whatever that means. Elohim baznenu shamanu. God, we heard with our own ears. Our ancestors told us that of the deed, this translation says deeds, but I like deed better, of what you did for our ancestors in days of old. Probably, my guess, a fulfillment of Deuteronomy, where it says, "V'higadeta levanecha." In every generation, you should tell your children about the going out of Egypt. The implication is, we did what we were commanded to do. What about you? How come you have not fulfilled your side of the bargain? Now comes the description of what it was like in the old days. Pa'al pa'alta. You did a marvelous deed in days of old. It's not, in the eyes of the psalmist, it was one deed. The going out of Egypt, the standing of Mount Sinai, the crossing of the Jordan was one interconnected deed, not three deeds. And so the psalmist says, in the old days, you did something great for us. Your hand dispersed nations. You planted them, and then you dispersed them. You smashed people, and you sent them away. You drove the Canaanites out of the promised land. Verse 4, it was not by the Israelites, by our, really should be our, not by their own sword did we inherit the land, but not by their own arm did our ancestors win the battle. No, it was your right hand and your arm that won the battle for us. And you won it for us with the light of your countenance. Two possible explanations of that phrase, by the light of your countenance. Could read like it does in the morning prayer. Out of the light out of your kindness, you gave us the living Torah and the many good things. Could be that. There's another possibility. In ancient pre-biblical mythology, the gods of the pagans had fiery faces. And when they went to war, their faces were so frightening that their enemies ran away from them. So that's what it may mean here. It may mean that you had such a radiant, frightening, terrifying face that our enemies ran away from us. So you deserve the credit for our victory, not us. I'm not going to go into the word salve. I'm just going to say that it's really past tense, not present tense. It may need to be amended. I don't want to go into that. But you, my King, are our God. You commanded the delivery, the rescue, the victory of Jacob. Through you, we gored our enemies. In your name, we trampled those that rose up against us. In other words, you won the victory for us. Not with my bow, not in my bow and arrow did I trust. Not upon my sword. My sword didn't save you. You saved me. You delivered us from our enemies, and those that hated us, you put to shame. Clear? In God, we glory all the day, and your name we will give praises. Going to come back to verse 9 later, but still, end of first unit. God, you were great to us in the old days. And now comes the shift to the present. Verse 10. Ellie, verse 10. Off. It ain't like that today. In opposition to everything that I said until now, in opposition to everything I said in the first 9 verses about how you used to be so good to us, how you protected us, how you won wars for us in the old days, not today. Now you humiliate us. Now you no longer lead us in battle. We used to call you Adonai Tzevaot, the Lord of hosts. That's what God is called in the Marav service, the Lord of hosts. 10. You neglected us, you disgraced us, you didn't go forth with our armies. Instead, you let us go by ourselves. In fact, you did worse than that. You led the enemy army against us. That's the reason we were defeated and routed. You abandoned us. And now there come a series of accusations. Look with me at the first word in verse 13, 14, 15, 16, 2. Verse starting with 13, 12, I think. 12? Yeah, 12. Titnenu, 13. Timkor, 14. Tasimenu, 15. Pistimenu. All 4 of those lines begin with the letter Taf, which means you. The English is stronger than the Hebrew. The English is a better version of the Hebrew. You sold your people for no wealth. You set no decent price upon them. You made us scornful to our enemies. You made us a derision and a mockery to everybody around us. You made us a byword among the nations. You made us a shaking of the head among the people. All day long, my disgrace is before me, and the shame of my face covers me. You. It's stronger than just a text. You're the one to blame for all our troubles. You handed us off to our enemies. It's like a relentless accusation. It's like a husband and wife who have been not getting along for a long time, and their resentment of each other has kept boiling up until finally it explodes. And one of them lets go of all the anger he's been keeping inside, and he screams at his wife, "You did this to me. You did this to me. You did this to me. You did this to me. And I'm sick and tired of it. And I'm not going to take it anymore." That's the effect of the you. You made me retreat. You made me lose the war. You. Verse 16 is the opposite of verse 9. In verse 9, you cared for me all the day. In verse 16, you abandoned me. And now comes verse 17. Verse 17. And the sheep metaphor. It's the opposite of Psalm 23. In Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not fear. Here it says, you're the shepherd who neglects me. You're the shepherd who turns his back on me. You're the shepherd who doesn't do what a shepherd is supposed to do. You're the shepherd who lets me down. For no reason, for no good reason. You sold us cheap. Bad enough that you sold us, but you sold us cheap. You treated us as though we were worthless. You gave us away without even asking for a decent price. You sold us timkor amcha b'lohon, lo rivita mechirateim. You sold us for no wealth, for no price. You set no proper price for us. You sold us cheap. You sold us the way somebody sells a piece of junk that he just wants to get rid of. He sells it at any price, just so he can get rid of it. That's what you did with us. You sold us cheap. It reminds me what used to happen at a slave market in this country. If the slave that was being sold was a strong slave, the owner would hold up his arm and show everybody, all the people at the auction, look what a good, strong, look what mighty muscles he has. And then the slave owner would open the slave's teeth and say, look what good teeth he has. And doing this, he would try to get a proper price for the slave. But if the slave was old and weak and handicapped, the owner would just say, slave for sale, any price. He just wanted to get rid of him. That's how you sold us. What hurts the psalmist the most is not so much the defeat in battle. Everybody loses battles once in a while. What hurts the psalmist is the disgrace and the shame and the humiliation that his people got after the defeat. And now, Shai Held gives a contemporary parallel. And I may not agree with his politics, but listen to this parallel just the same. Shai Held says, this is how some Palestinians feel when they have to stand in line for hours and hours and hours at a checkpoint, waiting to get into Israel so they can get some work. And then when they finally get to the head of the line, after standing in the sun for hours, when they finally get to the head of the line, they have to go through a demeaning body search. The Israeli police or soldiers search them from head to foot, even in the crevices of their bodies, in order to make sure they've got no hidden weapons. And then, after standing in line in the hot sun for hours, after going through a humiliating body search, they're finally allowed to cross the green line and to go to work. And what do they do when they get there? They're put to work tearing down the very houses in which they used to live and replacing them with new houses, which are meant for the new immigrants who are coming into the land. Can you imagine any bigger disgrace, any bigger humiliation than that? To have to tear down your own houses and to replace them with new and better houses, which are going to go to other people and not to you. The humiliation, the shame is worse than defeat in battle. And then the psalmist says, we have become a symbol of contempt. We have become a byword for humiliation. If you want to call somebody a nothing, if you want to call somebody a nobody, you know how you say it? You say, what are you, an Israelite? There is no more degrading, insulting name for a nobody than to call him an Israelite. There's no more cruel word that our masters can use when they want to demean somebody than to compare him to us. And now verse 16 is the opposite of verse 9. Verse 9 says, I used to praise you all day long. Verse 16 says, now I am humiliated all day long. And now, starting with verse, I guess, 18, the psalmist says something that I think is remarkable. He says that you've done all these things to us, and yet we have not forgotten you. We have stayed loyal to you. You haven't stayed loyal to us, but we've stayed loyal to you. We have not prayed to alien gods. That's what most conquered countries did. If your country beat my country, that means your God is stronger than my country. And so I would worship your gods. But we have not done that. We didn't do that. We didn't pray to alien gods, even though the temptation to do so must have been tremendous. We did not abandon you. And not only that, we stayed loyal to you, not only in our actions, but in our hearts. And if you don't believe me, check. I dare you. Look into my heart if you want to, and you'll see we have not strayed. You're supposed to be the God who's able to see inside our heart. You are, as the Master puts it, Bochein Klayot V'Lev. You are the one who can see inside us. So look into my heart. I dare you, because if you do, you'll find I have not worshipped foreign gods in public, and I've been loyal to you inwardly as well. So why haven't you been loyal to us? That's the gut question. I've been loyal to you. How come you have not been loyal to us? And now he says a line that can be read in two ways. Mekom Tanin. Eli translates it as a place of sea monsters. Okay, there are two possible ways to translate it. Sea monsters, which would mean in ancient mythology, before God created the world, there were sea monsters. And God tore one of the sea monsters, the Tanin, in half, put one on top, put one on the bottom, and that's how God made the world. So you threw us back into chaos. You threw us back to a pre-creation state. You threw us into the world of sea monsters. Or it can be read, and this is an equally possible translation, you threw us to where the jackals live. The jackals, I don't know much about animals. Jackals were evidently considered the most vicious, the cruelest of all the animals. And so you not only defeated our animals, you not only sold us cheap, you not only shamed and humiliated us, you threw us to the jackals. You threw us to enemies. I think it doesn't mean jackals mean our enemies, who are like jackals. They treat us with brutality and cruelty. And whose fault is it? It is your fault, oh God. You threw us to the jackals. Today we might say you threw us under the bus, or you threw us to the wolves. In the Bible, they say you threw us to the jackals. This psalmist is really, 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 really angry at God. How could you do this to us? And now comes in verse 20, don't go away, go back. Yeah, verse 20. You have thrust us to a place of sea monsters or jackals, and you covered us b'tsalmavet. Who remembers the word salmavet? It's found in verse 23. The Lord is my shepherd. But there, salmavet means even though you led me through deep darkness, or even though you led me through the valley of the shadow of death, whichever it means, you were with me, and therefore I was not afraid. Here it means the opposite. You led me into deep darkness, you led me into the shadow of death, and then you dumped me there, you left me there, you abandoned me there. In Psalm 23, it's a reason not to fear. In Psalm 23, it's a proof of God's love. Even when I was in the valley of the shadow of death, I wasn't afraid because you were with me. Here, it's the opposite. Here, you leave me alone in the valley of the shadow of death. You leave me alone in the place of deep darkness. And that's the reason why I'm terrified and frightened and bitter and above all, angry at you, God. Look at verse 26. Verse 26. Ishacha la'afar nafsheno. Forgive me, Eli, I'm going to disagree with your translation. You made my nefesh lie in the dust. You made my body lie on the ground. In Psalm 23, we have the line, Nafshi Yeshoveh. What is it? You restore my soul. That's a total mistranslation. Nefesh has, that Psalm 23 has nothing whatsoever to do with soul. Nafshi Yeshoveh means you restored me, you refreshed me. I had a rest and I woke up full of energy again. Nefesh in most of the Bible doesn't mean soul. Nefesh in most of the Bible means throat, gullet, the place from which you breathe. You made me lie down on the ground with my neck on the ground and my stomach on the ground. And therefore I couldn't breathe. You can't breathe. That's what we learned in Minneapolis last year. I forget the guy's name. He was famous the world over because they put him on the ground, remember? And they one guy put his foot on his neck, and he kept saying, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. You can't breathe if your neck is on the ground. And that's what it means here. Somebody put his foot on your neck, you die. You can't breathe, so you die. And that's what it means here. You stretched me out on the ground, top and bottom. My neck was on the ground, my body was on the ground. And now he says, 27, come on already, rise, help us, redeem us, for the sake of your loyalty, for the sake of your reputation, for the sake of your kindness. Verse 28. Verse 28. Verse 28. Kuma esotan is 27. I'm sorry. Move up to 25 for a minute. 24. Yeah. Kuma uru lama tishan Adonai hakitza al tiznach lanetzach. It's you got to read this as a scream. Wake up already. Why are you sleeping, God? Wake up. Don't neglect. Wake up, God. Don't sleep. In order to understand this verse, you got to know two other passages in the Bible. One is Psalm 121, where it says, Shomei Yisrael, lo yanam v'lo yishan. The guardian of Israel is always on guard. He never sleeps. He never slumbers. Whenever you need him, he's there. And here, get up, God, wake up already. It's a turnaround of Psalm 121. And it's a turnaround of another verse. There's a verse, a story in the book of Kings. Elijah the prophet summons 400 priests of Baal, pagan priests, challenges them to a contest. He builds one altar, and he says, you build one altar. He puts an animal of sacrifice on one altar, and he tells them to put a sacrifice on the other altar. He puts water on his sacrifice, and he tells them to put water on their sacrifice. Why do you put water on a sacrifice? It makes it harder to burn. And then the psalmist says to the pagan priests, tell your God to come down and light the sacrifice. And nothing happened. And he says to the pagan priests, what's the matter? Maybe your gods are sleeping. Maybe they got a nap. Why don't you yell a little bit louder? If you do, maybe your gods will wake up. And they yell, and their gods don't wake up. And then he says, make more noise. Maybe you'll wake them up. And so they yell and they yell and they yell and they yell. And they dance and they dance and they dance and they dance. And they scream and they scream and they scream. And the pig Baal and Ashtaroth don't answer. And then Elijah gives one mighty shriek to God. And fire comes down from heaven and consumes his sacrifice. And all the people who are watching this call out in one voice, Adonai hu Elohim. That's how we end Yom Kippur. The last words of the Yom Kippur service. Adonai hu Elohim. We say it 7 times, remember? The Lord is the true God. The Lord is the one true God. That's the way it was in the book of Kings. And now look at our line. Now it's the psalmist who says, come on already, wake up, God. God is sleeping here. This is the bottom of the Bible. I can think of no other place in the Bible in which anybody speaks so bluntly, so brazenly, so brutally, so insultingly, if there's such a word, to God. I don't know of any other place in the Bible where a psalmist says, come on, God, wake up already. Stop sleeping. And then comes the last line. I don't see it. Move up a little bit. Up a little more. I don't see the line I'm looking for. Down, and not so fast. Not so fast. Wake up, don't sleep forever. Why do you turn away from us? Why do you forget our suffering? Why do you let us lie on the ground, neck and body? Get up and save us for your sake. There's one line I can't find, very important line. The psalmist says to God, Yalecha huragnu kol hayom. Yalecha huragnu kol hayom. Can be translated in 2 ways. Can be translated, for your sake, we are slaughtered all the day. For your sake, which I got to tell you is a little bit of a consolation. If the martyrs of the Middle Ages clung to this verse. You're going to get killed, at least get killed for a reason, not for no purpose. On account of you, for your sake, we were killed we are killed the whole day long. All right, there's another way to read the psalm, which is more chutzpahdik and more brazen. You can read this psalm as saying, on account of you, we are slaughtered all the day. Because you don't get involved. You don't care. You let us get slaughtered. You look the other way. You're indifferent. That's why we're slaughtered every day. That's a even worse way of reading the psalm than the first way. First way, at least, no, you die, but you die for a good cause. The second way, you die for no cause. God doesn't care whether you live or die. That's tough. Psalm, I don't know if you know this, but I believe that Psalm 48 is part of a long, long line of such anti-God or rage against God that you can find in the Jewish tradition. There's the Didn't Torah mit Gott by Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, in which he starts, Levi Yitzchak ben Tzur, Berditchev, Ob gekommen zu euch mit der Didn't Torah. I've come to you, God, with a trial. I want to put you on trial. What do you have against the Jewish people? Why are you always picking on us? Wherever you look in the Bible, it says, command the Jewish people. Wherever you look in the Bible, it says, this is the law for the Jewish people. You don't ever command the Babylonians. You don't ever command the Parthians, just us. The Russians think their czar is a czar. The British think their king is a queen is a queen. The Germans think their czar is a czar. But I tell you, let there be an end to the Golus already. Let the Messiah come already. And meantime, Yiskadav Yiskada Shmei Rabba. I'm going to praise you, God. Starts out condemning God, can't help it. Ends up praising God. There's a Yiddish poet named Katya Maladovsky who writes a poem called We're the Chosen People. Do me a favor, God, pick somebody else for a while. We're tired of being the chosen people. But I think that the psalm, if people came out of the concentration camp in our time, and you handed them Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, they couldn't say it. The words would stick in their throat. What kind of shepherd? 1 million Jews killed, 6 million Jews murdered? What kind of shepherd? How can I say that he's all good and all powerful after what I've been through? If you showed them Psalm 30, if you showed them Ashrei, I don't think the Jews that came out of the concentration camp could have said it. But I think they could have said Psalm 44. They could have expressed their anger, their rage, their bitterness at God with Psalm 44. And now I want to show you just one short story. A short story that comes from Chaim Grad, one of the great Yiddish writers of our time. Chaim Grad started out in a Musar yeshiva. Does everybody here know what a Musar yeshiva is? A Musar yeshiva is not a place where you study only Talmud. A Musar yeshiva is a place where from morning to night you do chesed and effort. From morning to night you look inside yourself and you try to admit your fault. That's what a Musar yeshiva is. Night and day, you look inside yourself and you try to correct your own fault. As somebody once said about the Musar movement, you may leave. And if you leave, you may sin, but you'll never enjoy it. You'll never enjoy sinning because the Musar movement trains you to worry about the Yetzer Hara and to try to get rid of the Yetzer Hara, no matter what. Chaim Grada had a classmate in the Novardok Yeshiva whose name was Chaim Erziner. Chaim Grada left the yeshiva. He wanted to make it as a writer in the outside world. Riemer stayed in the yeshiva and ended up in a concentration camp. And after the war, the two of them bump into each other outside a hotel in Paris called the Hotel de Ville. Over their heads, on the wall of the museum next to the hotel, are statues of all the great heroes of the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. Statues of all the scientists and the philosophers and the poets that brought about the modern world. And when the two of them meet, they both say the same thing to each other. One says, "No, can you believe in God after what happened?" Another one says, "No, can you believe in people after what happened?" And the two of them sit down a bench and they begin to talk. Chaim Gradner says, "Reb Hirsch, you ought to have respect for these statues. These philosophers and science and poets, they brought wisdom and culture and sophistication to the world." And Hirsch Regina says, "Really? Is that so? What kind of wisdom did your so-called heroes bring to the world?" They were thinkers, but the minute they had to put their theory into practice, their system of thought broke down. They were like dogs who walk along politely, well-trained dogs, who follow their master politely until they see a bitch. And the minute they do, they break away and they go for her. Don't you know, Reb Chaim? Germany was the center of philosophy and science and art. And it was your heroes who were the first ones to obey and join the Nazis when they came into power. I should respect them? Chaim Grad responds, "And what about you, Reb Hirsch? I remember I used to walk the streets of Novardok with your head held down because you were afraid to see the temptations of the world. I remember how the women who worked in the marketplace used to bring you food at the end of the day. And what did you give them in exchange, Reb Hirsch? You gave them lectures on how much they were sinning and how much they needed to repent. Let me tell you something, Reb Hirsch. You sold your share in the world to come to those women. You sold it 12 times. Don't be so afraid of the world. Don't be afraid to look at the world." And Reb Hirsch answers, "I'm not afraid of the world. I've seen the face of the evil. I know what it's like. I'll tell you something, Reb Chaim. If God had come to me, even at the worst time in the concentration camps, if God had said to me, even at the moment when the Nazi had his boot on my face, if God had said to me, 'Would you like to trade places with this Nazi?' If you say yes, I can do it." Do you know what I would have said to God? I would have said, "No, no, no, thank you." I would have thanked God for having made me a Jew and not a Nazi. And what about you, Reb Chaim? You live for praise, like all writers do. You sit under the table of the literary critics and you hope that maybe they'll throw you a crumb or a word of approval. Are you able to say to God, "I would rather be a Jew than be one of them"? Can you say that? And then Reb Hirsch says, "Let me tell you, Reb Chaim, I know how great the power of the Yetzer Hara is. Believe me, I know. I have bloodied my hands trying to rip it out of my body. And do you know what I've learned, Reb Chaim? There's only one way in the world to conquer the evil impulse. You know what it is? By obeying the Torah. Reason will never do it, because reason can always reason with reason. If I had my way, I would ask God to give us more commandments, more and more and more commandments. I would ask him to give us harder commandments, because the Torah and the commandments are the only ways we have with which to overcome the temptation of the evil impulse. Reb Chaim, don't you know that by now? And then Reb Hirsch tells Reb Chaim, after going through all the hell of the Holocaust, you know what he's doing now? He's opened up a yeshiva. He's opened up a yeshiva in Germany, of all places. And Chaim Grad is shocked when he hears that. He says, where on earth do you get students? After the Holocaust, who would want to study Torah after what happened? And especially, who would want to study Torah in that profane place, Germany? And Reb Hirsch Riemer says, don't worry, Lo Alman Yisrael, God is not a widower. I find students for my yeshiva everywhere. In fact, I'm on my way to Morocco right now in order to interview some prospective students. And Chaim Grada says, God may not be a widower, but the Jewish people are. We have lost a third of our people, and you still believe in the Torah? Are you crazy? How can you still believe, Reb Chaim? And Hirsch Riemer says, and what do you believe in, Chaim Grada? Do you still believe in those people whose faces are carved on those statues over the wall over there? Those were not heroes. They were thinkers who created systems of thought. But when the chance came along to seize some pleasure or to keep their jobs, they forgot their systems, they forgot their philosophies, and they did whatever they had to do. Do you know that the artists
Rabbi Riemer, you're frozen. Can you hear me? Give me a minute. I'm going to call his son-in-law, okay, everyone? Can you hear me? Anybody? Somebody?
Yes, we
Yes,
can
I
hear
could
you.
hear
Okay,
you.
okay.
He's
Give me 1
frozen.
second. Yeah, he doesn't know he's frozen though, I don't think. He may have to just log out. He was right in the middle of the story. It's like, Rabbi's frozen. I think you may have to log out and log back in. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. It's like we have 2 minutes left to the movie and the screen just went black.
So we lost power.
Oh my goodness. I'll be right back.
okay,
Wait, hold on. Is this working?
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Chaim
Okay.
Grada says, have respect for the non-Jews.
You may want to record.
Wait, yeah.
Have respect for them. That's how Chaim Grada says, if I brought you non-Jews who risked their lives to save Jews, would you call them goyim? Would you call them pagans? Would you call them idolaters? Or would you bow your head in respect? They saved the lives of Jews at the risk of their own lives. And what about us? What about we secular Jews? Reb Hirsch, don't push us out of the Jewish people. Don't declare us sinners. Don't bar us from being a part of the Jewish people, even if we don't believe in your God. And the two of them go like this, back and forth, page after page after page. And every time you hear Chaim Grada speak, you find yourself agreeing with him. And every time you hear Hirsch Riemer speak, you feel yourself agreeing with him. And you begin to understand that both of them are parts of Chaim Grada. But on one hand, he envies Hirsch Rosiner and he admires him for being able to have faith. And on the other hand, he has contempt for Hirsch Rosiner for having a brutal faith, a bizarre, wrong faith, and for excluding him and people like him from the house of Israel. The debate goes on back and forth, back and forth. Neither one is able to persuade the other. And then in the last line, after this long debate, Chaim Grada gets up and he says to his old classmate, Reb Hirsch, things have ended up differently for both of us. The storm that ripped us apart from our roots scattered us both. It took you to a yeshiva in Germany, who would have believed it? It took me to a writer's cafe in France, who would have believed that? Who knows when or whether we will ever meet again? May we both have the merit of meeting again someday, somewhere. Who knows? Maybe then we'll be able to agree on which one of us is right. But until then, Reb Hirsch, was mir Zennen Zennen mir, aber jeden Zennen mir. Whatever we are, we're both Jews. May we continue to be. Even though I think you're a twisted, perverted fanatic, and even though you think I'm a sinful idolater. Until then, I beg you, Reb Hirsch, don't exclude me from the Jewish people. Let's embrace each other. Let's wish each other well until we meet again. And on that note, the curtain falls. That's the end of the story. I would like, it may be naive of me, I would suggest that what happens in the last line of this story could someday happen between the person who wrote Psalm 23 and the one who wrote Psalm 44. One loved God, one had contempt for God. Nevertheless, my fantasy is someday they may meet and hug each other. And now let me tell you a second fantasy that I have. We live in a world right now where those who are on the left in American politics have nothing to do with those crazy people on the right. And those who are on the right in American politics want nothing to do with those terrible people on the left. May we be able to sit at the same table. Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, at the Seder, as befits families to do. May we be able to learn how to treat each other's Jews with dignity, with respect, as befits members of one family to do. May we be able to read Psalm 44 with all its bitter anger at God, with respect and with appreciation for the truth that it contains. And may we be able to read Psalm 23 with all the love of God and all the gratitude to God, with respect and with appreciation as well. Because if we can do that, we will be one Jewish people. If we will listen to each other and learn from each other, we'll be able to live with each other. And if not, God forbid, there will be no Jewish people. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, good try.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
What do you think?
Good luck with-
Besides-
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's a-
what is the name of the story?
my creek, and translated by Milton Hibblfarb, my quarrel. It's stronger than quarrel.
Okay,
My war, my creek, like a blitzkrieg.
okay.
My creek with Hirsch Rosiner. Yeah.
Ivy?
Yes, there was a Canadian movie made in 1991. Is that
Yes.
based on that? The
Yes, yes.
Quarrel?
It became a
Okay, I've
play.
shown it.
Yes,
It's a
Joseph
great movie.
Telushkin.
It's called The
Yes,
Quarrel.
yes, yes, yes.
You can get it. It's
Joseph
on-
Telushkin made it into a play which appeared in Montreal. Cast set it in Montreal, and then it was made into a movie. And it's, if you want to read it, it's the last story in the book, A Treasury of Jewish Stories. It's a beautiful, I didn't do justice to it. It's a great story.
You did wonderful justice to it, Rabbi. You had us
But on
captivated.
every page, when you hear the argument of each one, you're convinced. They really, I mean, you believe in this war, this brave world? You believe in this world that's been destroyed? Back and forth. A powerful, powerful story. I think it's one of the greatest